Hello guys, this is another Jeem video, and today I want to talk briefly about the Maronite Christians. Who are they, where do they come from, and what are their beliefs? So, when you think of a Maronite Christian, usually, the people who know what they are, you would think of the country of Lebanon. And when you think of a Christian from Lebanon, you think of a Maronite. See, the Maronites are completely intertwined with the destiny of Lebanon, and it is because of them that that nation was even born out of the ruins of the Ottoman Empire. So how did the Maronites come to be, and what are their beliefs? Well, the Maronites are a branch of Catholicism. They belong to the Eastern Catholic denominations, of which there are Byzantine, Maronite, and a couple of other denominations. Eastern Catholics are in full communion with the Roman Catholic Church. Their liturgy is just different, and they're allowed to retain their own, you could say, native or indigenous liturgical traditions while remaining fully theologically in communion with Rome. So 99 probably or 98% of all Catholics on earth are Roman or Latin Catholics. Roman and Latin mean the same thing. So Roman Catholics can be found in Latin America, the United States, Canada, half of Europe, Sub-Saharan Africa, Philippines, and is growing in some areas as well. So that's Roman Catholicism. Eastern Catholics really are a minority pretty much in every nation they belong to, and they are usually centered around the Middle East. There's also some in India and a lot in Eastern Europe. So that's what an Eastern Catholic is. Maronites are one branch of Eastern Catholicism. I'll do a video on the other ones as well. Now, Maronites originated in northwestern Syria, in a city called Antioch, or rather, in the boundaries surrounding Antioch. See, a certain man named Saint John Maroon left from the urbanized environment of Antioch, exiled himself into the wilderness, and had an ascetic life. So he wanted to focus on God. He had his scriptures with him, and he read them as he possessed these caves and repurposed old pagan temples. After a while, he began to gain a following, and he had many disciples that broke away from the bustle of city life and all of its temptations and corruptions. I wanted to have a life like his and focus on God. Now, he had a certain disciple named Saint Abraham of Cyrus, who came along eventually, much after the movement was started. And Saint Abraham was sent into the area called Lebanon today. He went to the mountains of Lebanon, and he converted the vast majority of its pagans into becoming Christians, specifically following the Maronite sect. So that's how Maronites arrived in Lebanon. The majority of them were indigenous to the mountains, and they were converted from paganism into Maronite Christianity. But the original Maronites came from northwestern Syria. Now, the main power of the region was known as Byzantium, the Byzantine Empire, the Greco-Roman eastern half of the Roman Empire that survived until the 1400s. And the Byzantines, for whatever reason, saw this Maronite movement as heretical and did not see them as loyal to their own orthodox interpretation of Christianity. So the Byzantines tried to eradicate the Maronites just like they had tried to eradicate the Coptic Christians of Egypt, who were Oriental Orthodox, a different kind of orthodoxy, which I talked about in a previous video about the Ethiopians. So the Byzantines tried to eradicate them, but the Maronites found safety in the Orontes Valley and mainly in the mountains of Lebanon. Then, when the first Muslims sprang out of the Arabian Peninsula and conquered the northern part of the Middle East and all the way across North Africa, they ejected the Byzantine Empire out of there, as well as the Sasanian Persians. So with the Byzantines gone, that pressure was off, but now they had new administrative empire in the region, and that was the Umayyad Caliphate. Now the Umayyads, being as all-powerful as they were in the region, actually had a humiliating episode where a lot of the Maronite warriors would go and they would besiege the army encampments of the great Umayyad Caliphate and annoy and harass them so much that the Umayyads, despite being the great power of the region, actually paid the Maronites a ransom and a tribute to leave them alone for a while. I thought that was pretty interesting. The Maronites survived throughout the entire history of Islam, and then eventually when the Crusaders would come from Europe, descended upon Bilad al-Sham, so the Levant, they found their long-lost cousins, the Maronites, still living in the mountains of Lebanon. And most of Europe had assumed that all Christians in the Middle East had converted or their denominations had just died out. But the Maronites actually said that they had been loyal to Roman Catholicism since the very start, and they never broke communion. Now, a scholarly look at their history will reveal that they may have been a little heretical at the beginning, and they may not have always been in communion with Rome, but is the claim that they have been. Either way, they have always been loyal to Rome, because when the Crusaders arrived, they immediately pledged their allegiance to them. Not all of the Maronites, but some of them did. So some were neutral, some were against the Crusaders, but a lot of them were part of the crusading armies in order to try to retake the region for Christendom. So that's when they officially joined the Roman Catholic Church. And since then, they've been instrumental in creating the nation of Lebanon, and actually some of the first Arab nationalists were Maronites, despite the weird reputation Maronites have for being against Arab identity. So that's a basic history of who the Maronites are and how they came to be. As for their beliefs, they're 100% Catholic, but they have their own liturgy. Their liturgical language is Syriac, which is a variant of Western Aramaic dialect, so extremely similar to the language dialect that Jesus Christ would have been speaking in the Holy Land. There are other versions of Aramaic that are spoken mainly by people known as Assyrians who live in northern Iraq, parts of Syria, and Turkey and Iran. And so the Maronites used to be able to speak Syriac a little more regularly, but now it's 100% a liturgical language, just like the language of Latin, and much like the language of Coptic, which really is not used conversationally in Egypt at all, or amongst Coptic Egyptians. So that's the main history of the Maronites, and they've had a tumultuous history, and probably, in my opinion, if you look aside from theology, the Maronites are the most successful minority group in the Middle East by far. So they're the only tribe of Christians who were able to maneuver themselves their own nation. They're the only tribe of Christians who were able to remain relevant in terms of authority and power. Nowhere else in the Middle East today are there Christians who are allowed to be the president of state, nor are they the president of state, nor do they have a monopoly over the power of the army and many different sectors of finance and economy. Only in Lebanon, where the Maronites are from, originally they're from northwestern Syria, but today Mount Lebanon is the nexus of the Maronites. So only there are there any Christians in the Middle East who have the kind of power that they have. So it's quite fascinating, and their liturgy is quite beautiful. And one last thing to mention is that some Maronites, although they belong fully in communion with the Roman Catholic Church, some will act very Latinized, and some will be more Orientalized, more Eastern-based. So that's the thing with Eastern Catholics. They can either be more Catholic or a little more Eastern. And I guess the way to explain that is you have some Maronites who are pretty much just like any other Catholic. They have the rosary and maybe a little statue of Jesus or Mother Mary. Or what they'll do is some of them are a little more like the Orthodox or the Oriental Orthodox, and they'll have a prayer book that allows them to pray the Jesus prayer. It's kind of up to their own decision. I mean, there's nothing in Catholicism says you cannot pray the Jesus prayer, and nothing in Orthodoxy says you cannot pray the Rosary. It just happens that because they're caught in the middle of the East and, of course, Roman Catholicism, you find some Maronites on different ends of the spectrum. In recent times, people have complained that the Maronite liturgy has become very Latinized, and there are efforts to peel that back and bring back traditional Syriac Aramaic liturgical practices into the churches. But yeah, so that is the history of the Maronites, and I'll do a video more on Eastern Catholicism, and of course, I'm going to end up doing a massive series on all of Catholic history. So thanks for watching.